Say the second one, Ame. Say it again, Ame. Okay, let's say it together. Agu, Ame. Agu, Ame. Only change we're going to do is this one change. We're going to say the Agu, and you're going to say the Ame. Okay? So when I say Agu, you say Agu, Agu. What that means is our tour guides gave us that. The first one means, I need your attention. And the response is, you have my attention. And he used it every day and in all kinds of places. So if I said, Agu, there you go, say it with some enthusiasm. In Ghana, the one thing we learned there real fast was those people got some enthusiasm. And they got some joy. Okay. So, Agu, Agu. All right. We're there. All right. The presenters you're going to have, we took sections as to what we were going to do, but we're going to probably wander around in different places so that you get a pretty good comprehensive feeling. So the first thing we're going to do is introduce the people up here. I have to look at mine again. I'm Kwaku Ame, Anani, and my name means good heart. Turn it on. Stop.
I am Kwame Astar. Kwabena Astar. It means strength and power.
I am Yah-Phobi. It means reconciliation.
Hello, I am Akusara Danswa. Akusara is given to females who were born on a Sunday in Danswa. My name means special and unique.
My name is Kwame Bansur, and Kwame is the day I was born, Saturday, November. And Bansur means responsible.
Ajua Anima, born on a Monday, precious.
These last two wonderful people here attend Colorado Community Church. They were with us as a part of a 13-person group. And what made our experience so interesting and so better, it wasn't a AAA tour. You know, you see the monument, there it is, you keep going. They gave us a cultural tour, a very special cultural tour that we wanted to share with you today, and they have come over to join us to do that. All right, we're going to talk, the sections are going to be, we're going to talk about getting there. Then we're going to cover contemporary Accra. May not be what you think it is. Then we're going to take you to a marketplace. Watch out. Then Karen has the hardest part. Can't remember her African name. She's going to take you in the footsteps of the slaves. How they were brought down, where they were kept, and where they went. And then Jeanette will do the naming ceremony. We got these names that half of us cannot remember right now. But that's the run. And you're free to ask questions as we go along, so it's more interactive. It's one thing the pastor wanted to make sure we did, so we're going to do exactly that. All right, so if I got this thing on, I point it the right direction. I'll talk to you about getting there. They said, what does that have to do with a trip to Ghana? Well, a lot of times when we travel, we fly over places. We're just worried about getting on the plane and getting there, getting on the train and getting there, getting in the car and driving there. We don't think about what's in between. Now, domestically, we can get away with that. But when you're doing international travel, it may be a good idea to try to find a window or look outside and see what you may be flying over, because it can be very interesting. That's our departure here. I'll go from that one to, in Chicago, what's the first thing we saw? An airliner from Ethiopia. Now, if that didn't start getting your head around where you're going, nothing will. Now, there was an Ethiopian Dreamliner that crossed our runway when we were getting there, and the new illustration on that Dreamliner is something artistically to behold. It was incredible. So when we got to the gate, I said, "Uh-oh, that's getting us set." We flew from Denver to Chicago, then Chicago to Brussels, Belgium. This Brussels airport, the heart of Europe. Well, see the nose of that plane? It says Africa 100. We learned there by looking around out the window and the people you're going to go to your next destination with. Most of the airlines in African countries in the Middle East flew to Brussels, Belgium. So you sit there talking to people from literally around the world, okay? That would have been a flyover. Just go there, where's my gate, I'm leaving. But that was another reminder about where we were going and why getting there is important. Also, in Brussels, we go to dinner here, we go to breakfast here, and they have Belgian waffles, right? How about having a Belgian waffle in Belgium? Okay. The only place you can do that is by being there. If you take a little time at the airport, you're able to do that, okay? Now, they have Belgian waffles a little differently. We pile them with syrup, they pile them with cinnamon. So it's a different deal, but you learn that. This was on a wall in that airport. Now, this is a map of the United States done by the markers, the things we go see in America. And you can just pick them right out. The saxophone for New Orleans, look over there, Hollywood, the brother up there, San Francisco, and Florida, the space launch. All that was done on that wall. Okay, it takes its time about coming up, doesn't it? What's the next one? That's a close-up of that same map. You see the Golden Gate Bridge, the illustration there. The artwork in international countries can be just amazing. There's Africa, all right? Same thing. Places that are there where we're going. You see the Egypt there, and we're going down there to Ghana in West Africa where you see the alligators out there in the ocean, but it's there. And that's one of the illustrations they used for West Africa, the sister, okay, and being there. So by just paying attention when you're getting the places, it makes it much more rich when you go. And of course, you arrive in Ghana. That's Accra from the air. That's how it looks, all right? And we're on arrival there. Now, before I get there, there's one other thing I have to point out to you. In flying from Brussels to Accra, we crossed France. You looked out and you saw Spain. You looked out and you saw Morocco. And the real impressive thing, you see those maps of Africa, you get that big brown spot across the middle? That's the Sahara Desert. Well, at 33,000 feet, you look out at that Sahara Desert, and all you see is desert for 400 miles. You can see how impressive that piece of sand is right there. And as I said, you get to Accra. And Accra is probably a little more modern than what we think. Oh, one more stop on the way back. You see that green up there in the top? You see the clouds there in the middle? The airline route flew us over Greenland. I never thought I'd see Greenland ever in my life. But that's what it looks like from the air. I just said, wow, Greenland. Okay. But pay attention, especially on international flights, because we cross so many countries. Also this year we went to Croatia. Karen had to teach at the University of Zagreb there. So there was another flight over Germany and Austria and Switzerland and all those places. So getting there is half the fun. Now, that's how Accra looks, and the guy that's going to take you to contemporary Accra, Wabena Asare.
I'll do again. All right, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about contemporary Ghana. A brief reflection. A nation rooted in rich history, yet boldly shaping its future. Ghana stands as a beacon of stability and progress in West Africa. Since becoming the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence in 1957, Ghana has continued to build a democracy grounded in civic participation, cultural pride, and commitment to unity. Its political landscape is known for peaceful elections, strong institutions, and a growing number of young leaders who are eager to push the country forward. Economically, Ghana is on the rise. It is one of the world's largest producers of cocoa and gold. It has become an important player in Africa's emerging technology, the innovative sector, new startups, digital payment systems, and youth-led enterprises reflect the creativity and resiliency of the Ghanaian people. Since Accra are becoming hubs of culture, entrepreneurship, and global engagement. So you can see there, I'm sitting in a lounge. You can see we're standing on the top right. Our team was Upwise Travel. You see a picture of Ghana. The center, that's key. That was our tour guide. As you can see, the landscape of Africa. It's pretty modern. It's not a lot of times how we're seeing it, where everyone's living in a hut or something like that. It's pretty advanced. So what you see now is Makoma Market is an energetic commercial heart of Accra, known for its vibrant stalls, bold colors, and lively atmosphere, from fabric and spices to handcrafted goods and everyday essentials. The marketplace showcases the entrepreneurial spirit of Ghanaian traders, especially struck the meaning of women. A walk through the Makoma is immersed into the sounds, flavors, and cultural energy that define Accra's bustling urban life. It is literally huge. You might have some other pictures of this, but as far as the eye can see, it's the marketplace. It's one of the first places we went to. It was kind of a little bit overwhelming, but we kind of navigated through it. I was a little worried about being lost when I got into the marketplace, because it is literally huge. One of the things I want to talk about is Jamestown Fishing Village in Accra. It's one of the city's oldest and most vibrant cultural communities, known for its colorful canoes, Austrian fish markets, and deep historical roots. Jamestown reflects both the resiliency, the cultural richness of Ghana's coastline. Despite modernization around it, the village remains a living testament to tradition and generations of fishermen. Handcrafters, the family continue to preserve the rhythms and heritage of Accra's past. Tuesday is considered a sacred day of reserve for the gods, the sea gods. That's why on Tuesday there's no fishing. The day is used to perform rites and settle conflicts among fishermen or honoring the sea deities. Fishermen use Tuesday to mend the nets and repair broken gear. The tradition helps fish stocks recover, acting as a kind of ecological rest day. There are mechanisms in place if someone breaks the taboo, penalties, fines, and traditional consequences. The last thing I'll talk about is the bee factory. Ghana's bee factory offers a captivating look into the country's most treasured tradition art form. Skilled tradespeople transform recycled glass and natural materials into vibrant handcrafted beads. Each piece carrying cultural symbolism and generations of craftsmanship. Visiting the bead factory reveals the beauty of Ghanaian creativity and the enduring importance of beads in ceremonies, fashion, and everyday life. If we get to it, we have a short video of how they make it. Actually, break glass bottles and they form beads from the glass. You can see in the pictures there, it's just like tons of beads, and it's a wonderful experience. And another thing about the entrepreneur is they all need this thought. There's no social safety net there, so people are entrepreneurs. Every part of the street, someone's doing something. They work very, very hard. They are wonderful people. Thank you. Any questions about what I covered now at the time? You have the floor. I don't know the name of the government, but it is. Yeah. They're parliament and political assistance or they have in elections. Anyone else? Absolutely. Focusing on the population is Asante, and Asante people, they fought the British for 100 years. So in 1957, what I said earlier, they finally kicked them out. But they were a warrior, there was always fighting that, but they do have the British system, except they drive on the right side of the road. No, they have their own resources. One of the things that the infrastructure still needs some improvement, like the roads and everything, but when we were driving, we could see a lot of equipment, so it's come along. So I think in 10 years, it's going to be very nice. Anyone else want to add? Anyone else before I have the microphone off? Go ahead. It's tropical. It's a tropical atmosphere, so it is 70 and above there.
So,
We're on the coast.
so our attire was created by a lady by the name of Emily, and it's Emily Creations. She's the dressmaker. And Tuesday, Wednesday night, we all met with her. We knew that we were going to be measured, but we didn't really know all the details. And so we were able to have her measure all of us, and we had attire made. And so this is her creation in terms of our attire. And it is warm there. So when we were there, it was pretty warm. Because I guess it's part of their summer season was starting. I believe so. But she is the one that created a lot of this.
I think I'll add in the daily attire of those there, shorts, t-shirts, and sandals. It is very dry when walking there, and the feet can get dirty, so sandals is very common. Respectfully, shorts for men and women, don't come up with those Daisy Dukes, and you did not see that there. Respectfully, below the knee, right above the knee as well. And even when we went and entered into certain places, women do not have those exposed shoulders. So yes, we did abide by that. The temperature was hot in the high 80s, 90s as well. Yes.
It was that, Jerry, I'm going to call him Jerry. Where? Who? How? Okay.
With that said, do they have air conditioning in places that you go into?
Some places did have AC. Yes, they did. And some of the buildings were older, going from architecture had. So they had individual rooms, had room AC on them, rather than like we have here, which is central air. Okay. Some of the newer buildings had central air, but the ones that have been there a while had window AC. Is there somebody else?
If I could just add in, the local dwellings for the majority of the people, as we rode through the streets and saw the homes where they were staying, did not have AC. And maybe through some of the pictures, you'll be able to see some of those homes.
Can you speak to the money, how compared to our dollar? What is the amount in Ghana? I remember when I was in South Africa, I overspent.
The easiest way to tell you that is the money's called the CD, and we are really on the upside with the American dollar. You can get anything you want. Okay. Give you an idea, probably $100 American would get you about 1,000 CD. All right. And they do have coins, but you didn't see them very often. Because a part of the bartering was that if you were high, if you were low, just keep it, man. You know, it's how that worked. So, going to move on to the next one. Jerry did touch a lot of what I was going to cover in the marketplace, but I'm going to give you a closer look at that marketplace anyway. What he was saying too, this was taken from the 8th story of a parking garage. That's in one direction. Now, the name of that marketplace, what he gave you, is also the second largest marketplace in Ghana. Right? It's only 6,000 vendors there. The largest one has 8,000, and it was in the next city we went to, but we did not go to it at all. I used to think of marketplaces in Africa as being like that until we got there and we saw what I just showed you there. That's another angle of it. You see how close the people are there? So the question becomes, hey, man, I want to set up my own store in this thing. Well, we were told that you find yourself a space. Once you find yourself a space, it's an elbow room, you bring your stuff in and you start selling. That's all it is. And I didn't know if they had any tax licenses or anything like that. Nah, they can't enforce it. It's too many of them. Way too many of them. And the thing about it that we learned is that I'm going the wrong way. How about the next direction, dude? What we learned was that I asked the question about supermarkets. You got a supermarket? Yeah, they had a whole chain of them. But we were also told the supermarkets come to this market first, and they get their goods, and they come back and sell them to you at a higher price in their spaces. That's how it is standing right there in it. And as Jerry said, anything you want, you can get. There was a woman that passed by us. She was about that tall. She was carrying a small refrigerator on her head out of the marketplace. And she just walking along with no big deal. Refrigerator. You can get anything you want there. Like that. Tomatoes. You want some fresh tomatoes? There you go. Get them all. Get them nice and cheap. They say you do your shopping on a weekend. You go there on a Saturday, and you try to get it all. I would probably go during the middle of the week to be less people. But you can go there and get what you need. The women there are sewing goods. They're making goods on site. 70% of the people who are working the marketplace are women. The men go out and they make stuff, and then they give it to the wives or whomever, and the ladies are the ones that bring it into the marketplace to sell. So the ladies are the ones that you see doing stuff. You saw that long shot that was down the street. If you did 180 degrees and looked the other direction, you'd see that. Okay? It just keeps on going. Now, you're not going to walk through that whole marketplace in one day. It's just not going to happen. But you can find the things you need by going there. And there was one other marketplace shot I just had to take. Because being from St. Louis, and you go to Opera and you see a St. Louis arch, it's like, what? How did that get here? All right. There it was. And that was toward the west, in another direction of the same marketplace. So I thought, okay, we better get to a smaller one. In the villages, the marketplaces are the center of commerce there. Everything, commerce flows through that marketplace. And they're much smaller there. It's another shot of the same marketplace. Everything, baskets, clothing. They also have fruits and vegetables, all in the village marketplace. As you can tell, she's quite happy with whatever she's seeing there. And I'm sure some of you ladies are picking out a few things right there that you might like to take back with you. But the village marketplaces, and they all have them, is a place to be. There's 16 regions in Ghana. And every one of them, and the smaller ones, have marketplaces. And as he was saying, that is making some beads. That gentleman he puts the glass in the molds inside the oven, and it cures the beads. That's another shot of him doing it. That thing is hot. Okay, he does that every day. This one I actually made some video of, and I didn't include it in there. You want to know where the kente cloth weave comes from? These are the people that do it, and their hands are so fast. Putting the threads in and pulling them down and crossing them over and putting them in. There is a rhythm to it. You can put some music to it. They do it so well and so quickly. The village marketplace, some dresses you can have. As one of the people on our tour said, the only white people we saw in Ghana were the mannequins. In the village. I'm sorry, but that's the way it rolled there for the time that we were there. Okay. Also, the bus was going down the road. People had stands on the side of the road where they were selling stuff. He's selling stuff from the side of the house or the interior of the house. You just pull over, pick it up, and keep going. All right? They had marketplaces, as Jerry said, the entrepreneurial spirit. If we had 50% of what they were doing here, we wouldn't have no issues. Okay, the way they were rolling there. You even had, you say, well, that's a little shanty. Yeah, but look at it. It's a store. All right? And in some of them, you would see that tin roof, and you open the door, it's just like a 7-Eleven store inside of it. They had stacks of Coca-Cola and stacks of drinks. Remember that? Stacks of water. How do you get all that? But that's how they roll there. That's how that commerce rolls at 3 levels in Ghana. Talk about the fishing village. You're closer up. Look at that. That's on one of those Tuesdays where they take the Tuesday off and don't go out there. But that's the size of the village down there. All right, Palm Coast. That's where that fishing village is. And you can see the size of that thing. Not as big as the marketplace in Accra, but there's a few people down there. Their primary fish they pull out are tilapia and red snapper. Hey, a lot of red snapper, because here it's like $25 for a little piece of filet. They give you the whole fish with the eyes on it and the tail and everything. You just eat that for days. Broiled or however you want it done, they can do it. That's it again on a work day and getting ready to go. I don't know whose hand that is that got in the way of my picture, but it did. Then they also go out in these small boats and they drop nets into the ocean. And the next day they come back. They have the ropes come up on the beach. And the next day they come back, and there might be 6 or 8 guys pulling that net out. And it takes, what was it, Karen, 6 to 8 hours, 6 to 8, to pull this net of fish out of the ocean. But when it comes out, they got some goods. And I had to take a picture of that since we destroyed USAID here. They were quite proud of it there because it helped them so well. Yeah, USAID did. Another shopping day at the fishing village? Yeah. I think I had mine grilled, and I think they baked it too. Yeah, fried as well. So you had some options there. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't buy no ladies' outfits there. But we had 2 ladies up here that looked at it, and one of them I know did some shopping, Jeanette.
I think I paid 1,000 CDs for this. About $100.
I got 2 of them, and I paid $175 for mine. And it was this and something else for both of them together.
Now, you also had the option in one of the marketplaces or at the village of buying something they had already made up at maybe a lower price, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And then you could also barter that price. If they said, I need 100 CD for this, you say, oh, no, man, look at the stitch. It's only worth 50 CD. And you go back and forth until you find a reasonable balancing point for it. And that works. Yes, ma'am.
Did you pick out the fabric and then they made it for you?
Yes.
How long did it take them to do
I think it took her 8 days.
Oh,
Yeah. So when we met with the lady, she did all of our measurements. We picked out our fabric, and that was on a Tuesday. We came back the next Tuesday, so about 7 days. The next Tuesday, and it was ready. So we had to try it out, make sure it fit. If it did, she would adjust it right there. And then we were ready to go on Wednesday. We left.
Yeah.
But I want to say about the fried fish, because you were like, yes, fried fish. It wasn't fried fish like we have fried fish, like catfish, where you have the cornmeal and all that. It was the fish with the eye in it. And so I really didn't try the fish because the fish was looking at me, and so I didn't try fish. It was delicious.
I could have eaten hers too. I didn't worry about the knives. I just filleted it and kept right on rolling. Couple of sidebars you need to know about. That is the guy that founded Ghana, who did their independence in 1957, Kwame Nkrumah. And they did a wonderful memorial to him. He is buried there. He's the first prime minister of Ghana, but he was the first prime minister of Gold Coast as well before Ghana. All right? Okay. And the thing you're going to love about the brother, he was educated at an American HBCU. It was the wrong Lincoln, but I still roll with it. Because I went to the one in Jefferson City instead of the one in Pennsylvania, but he went to the one in Pennsylvania and to the University of Pennsylvania, where he received a master's there. But he is the one that launched Ghana, and he also was the spirit behind something called Pan-Africanism, an independent and free Africa. He was the one that was generating the unity behind Africa there in the late 50s and early 60s. This memorial to him is quite large. Those are 6 paintings that were done of him. The thing I want you to pay attention to are 2 things. See that star? That's the symbol of Ghana, it's the black star. Where did he get the star from? America, when he was here. The same thing in Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh, who was the founder of North and South Vietnam together, and their constitution went to Yale University, and he brought back to Vietnam everything we had in our constitution. Okay, so we get everywhere. The others are saying this on the walls. I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. Okay? And that made me think about here and being an American. I said, America was kind of born in me, even though I embraced my African roots, but that says an awful lot. And this was quite a place that they built for him. The statues of people of the guys welcoming him, and then pounding out, "We are free now," there. And that's where he resides. And they also have a whole other area of the film that was going on. And the other people, then he contacted. Nelson Mandela is one, Patrice Lumumba, okay, Wally Nkrumah, all that group there. When I was in high school in St. Louis, they had a contemporary history curriculum that they had to teach us, and they did. But my professor or teacher said, I'm going to give you what they want, I'm going to give you something else. And he focused on the emergence of Africa then. And we were like, whoa, what is this? But then to go there and actually see it being made real was so strong. It was so strong. And then that same teacher came to Denver. It was the first was an assistant dean of the graduate school in Boulder. And he taught Denver how to gerrymander. You've heard that word before, right? Gerrymander districts in city council so that we picked up black representatives from 5 points in those kinds of ways. So he was ahead of the curve, and to see what he was talking about there was incredible. That's a young picture of President Nkrumah. And there's where he made the speech there. And they have that monument there, Freedom and Justice, 1957, the Black Star. Finally, you've seen this picture before, W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was here in America, but he was summoned to Ghana to edit an encyclopedia about Ghana. And that's where he died. But it lets you know that you can do things for your country here and do good things for another country someplace else. Yes, sir. Impression of what again? Of Americans? Every person that I talked to, you were just another brother on the street. That's what it was. They didn't have anything to say about what's going on here or anything else. It was more, can I sell you something? But yeah, the ones that we talked to, we just had regular conversations like anything else. Yeah.
By far, African Americans are the tourists over there. There are very few like Europeans over there. We ran into several groups like us that were there too.
I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt embraced, especially as a woman over there in the country. It was very, very women first. Yes. Let's go, sisters.
And this is where W.E.B. Du Bois, his final resting place. Oh, there was another one. Yeah, somebody put that Fisk up there. He went to Fisk. Yes.
I know. I read the autobiography of Kwame, and he speaks a lot about how much the African Americans here, as far as in Africa, was similar. And even when he was here, he was homeless at one point too, and stuff like that. And it was a really deep and basic book to actually know how far we've come and how far we can go if we just stick together, you know, and stuff like that. Because he paid a lot of tribute to what he did as far as learning over here and making it possible for us to go over there and go to schools and stuff like that and different things like that.
Thank you for the contribution. Another thing you need to know about W.B. Du Bois was in 1928, they had one of the first NAACP conventions outside of New York City. Guess where it was? Denver. And one of the primary speakers was W.B. Du Bois. It was right here. Okay?
And they also went to Lincoln Hills.
Yeah.
They did.
Okay. Yeah. My final slide is this one. To turn it over to for the next one. Where the slaves were, there was a plaque. A plaque was on that wall. When I read that plaque, I said, my takeaway from this whole trip is this one saying on there. We are the children of those who refused to die. When Karen talks about that, you see why that thing is so meaningful. And the other thing I was able to do, I was able to put my feet into the Atlantic Ocean on our side of the continent here. The one place I had to go to was to the Atlantic Ocean there, where our people left from, to complete that circle. So you were able to get it there. So, madam? Amen.
I do. Madasi. Adam, advance to the next slide, please. Adam, advance to the next slide, please. Advance to the next slide, please. That slide has volume. Please turn the audio up. We'll start from the beginning.
About that, our brothers and sisters traveling all the way from Salaga through Kumasi to the central region. This is the river they have to cross to get to the other side. And this same river is the borderline or the boundary line between Kumasi, or Ashanti region, and the central region. So we are entering into the central region. So see how big the central Ashanti region is, all the way from Kumasi. This is the borderline. So this is a famous Pra River that our brothers and sisters had to cross. And it was deep, a lot of them got drowned. And those who could not even make it to the other part were dumped into this river. It is called River Pra, P-R-A.
And if you couldn't catch the dialect, that was King, our tour guide. He was an excellent tour guide. And what he was saying is that is the Pra River. That is a river that several of our ancestors had to cross when they were taken from their villages to the last bath. So, journey with us as we go to the San Manso Slave Market and the Gold Coast Slave Dungeons. The San Manso Slave River Site is one of the most sacred places in the entire history of the transatlantic slave trade. It was the major last stop for enslaved Africans before being taken to the slave castles at Cape Coast or Elmina. I'm going to ask the panelists if you just said one word of how you felt stepping into the slave cemetery, what would your one word be? Adam, you have a mic. Start.
I don't know if I'm good to start with because I didn't set foot into the cemetery.
That is the cemetery.
I was really awestruck by just knowing what they went through and
One word.
what happened there.
One word.
So, I don't know one word.
Okay.
My word would be overwhelmed.
Sad.
Emotional.
Sad. Very sad.
Connected is my word. Connected with our ancestors. The San Manso Slave River Slide is a slave cemetery. 4 sets of ancestral remains from the Americas and Caribbeans have been brought back and buried here as a symbolic homecoming. That's what it is, a cemetery. And also, several slaves who were a part of the slave market taking place there, who died, were buried there as well. Unmarked slaves, unmarked areas where they were buried. The San Manso slave site is a place in Ghana where enslaved Africans, as we said, were brought for a final bath on African soil before being marched to the coast of the Atlantic crossing, before they were being marched to the slave castles. The San Manso slave market was the second largest slave market in Ghana. The first one is Salaga. Asen means transportation, by the way. San Manso was the most busiest slave market because of its close location to 3 slave castles, Elmina, Cape Coast, and Amsterdam. And during our tour, we attended 2 of the slave castles. We walked the path that our ancestors walked through the forest to the ancestral river. Many removed their shoes, all were quiet and in thought and very respectful during that walk. That is the actual path that our ancestors walked. The ancestral river refers to the sacred river at San Manso in Ghana, historically known as Dankwa Nsuo, meaning the slave river. Today it is honored as the ancestral slave river because millions of African ancestors passed through it during the transatlantic slave trade. It was the final place they touched African soil, African water, and African freedom. Because of this, it holds deep ancestral significance. The sacred river where enslaved Africans took their last bath is what this is, and where their descendants return to reclaim their first bath, reconnecting with ancestry, identity, and with healing. Captured Africans in the Ghana region were often forced to walk on a water of 100 and 400 miles from inland villages, markets, to the last bath at San Manso. Some slaves were forced to cross countries, can you believe this? Walking all the way from Ghana, 1,700 miles, Cameroon, Nigeria. So I ask you this question. Can you walk for 3 months? Raise your hand if this applies to you. That's about 400 miles under extreme hot conditions. Some of us when it's the temperature, right, is hot there. With no food or little water. And by the way, slaves, as they were walking shepherds, they were provided sips of water. The slave captors dropped water. Heavy shackles everywhere, half naked, no shoes, walking through thick and wild forests, heading attacked by wild animals. This is a market that is not in the history books. So, as captors walked with the slave shepherd, while the animals came, they between the carcass and the company of the shouted them to trees so the wild animals can attack them. While they were routed to take their slaves to the slaughterhouses. Can you make this journey? Our ancestors did. At the slave river, captives were washed to make them more clean or comfortable for sale. They were inspected for injuries or illness. They rested briefly before the final march, and they were sorted, branded, and prepared for action. By the way, the soldiers for natural hair, right? Broken bottles were used to shave their hair off, to cleanse their skin, or to remove the caked on blood and dirt that had accumulated over all of the walking in the sun and the heat and the pilings. They used bamboo leaves. If anyone is familiar with the bamboo leaves have prickly sides on them. That was not a clean thinking like you would brush. And when they bathed in the river, I read a description, and we had to watch this history for the last bath. It described it as it was a nice, relaxing place for those who were enslaved to refresh themselves. That's not the case. They were shackled one to the other. They were forced to bathe as well. And the reason that they were forced to bathe is so that they would appear and be presented better for auction. It's painful, guys, to talk about this, to know about this with our ancestors, but you know what? If we don't talk about it, who will? All right? Slaves were forced to do that bathing. Those are ancestors who survived at that point. They were auctioned and forced to walk yet another 31 miles to the slave castles. We walked through the forest. As we walked through the forest, we walked on a cleared path. They walked through the forest. And a lot of our ancestors, no shoes on their feet, not clothed as well, as they had to do this walk. What can we say about that? God was with them. Amen? The same way He's with us. Many did not survive the capture journey. That was a long, long walk, and it took several days. Many were killed, buried in unmarked graves, and some were buried alive as well. Those who were defiant were buried alive. Some estimates identify millions died during transport to the coast for the sale to European slave traders. That is about 1 out of every 3 slaves died. But we stood on the remains of our ancestors when we were at the ancestral grounds. Now we're going to take you into the slave castles and the slave dungeons. Our ancestors endured what no human being should have ever faced. The West African Gold Coast, modern-day Ghana, was one of the most active centers of the entire transatlantic slave trade. Along this coastline, European powers built massive stone fortresses known as slave castles. These structures served 2 purposes: military trading posts for gold, ivory, and spices. That was the beginning of what the original intent was. Holding prisons for enslaved Africans before they were forced onto ships bound to the Americas and other places, and managed by the Portuguese, Dutch, British, and other European powers. The 2 largest and most notorious were Cape Coast Castle, Elmina Castle, where we went as we visited both. Together, they processed hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of enslaved Africans over nearly 4 centuries, 366 years. So, what were those slave dungeons? As you can see individuals walking through right there. Beneath these huge white-walled castles were underground dungeons, dark, airless, overcrowded, prison chambers where enslaved Africans were held for weeks or up to 3 months or a little bit more, waiting for the return of the slave ships when they were taken away. The castles were built, guys, with a church or a chapel on top of the slave dungeon. So on Sundays, when they were at church, guess what? They could hear the slaves. They could smell the slaves. They could smell the anger, the pain as well as they went through their worship services. Let that sit in for you for a second. There were prison cells as well in the castles. And in some of the prison cells, and I don't have a picture of it, but the purpose of that prison cell was for the males who were defiant. They were locked in the cell, shackled to each other or to the wall. They were not provided food nor water, and the intent was for them to be there to die. Evilness. The conditions in the male dungeons were horrific. 200 to 300 were locked in rooms meant for 30. No windows, only a tiny slit or vent, no toilets. The floor was covered in human waste. Little air circulation, the stench was unbearable, and I can say I smelled when I went there. You can smell, you can feel of our ancestors when you step into those dungeons. Little air circulation, constant darkness. There could be a crack, a little square there where sunlight came in. Not guaranteed all the time. Starvation and dehydration were common. Suffocation. Men slept on hard stone floors in their own waste as well. Disease spread quickly, infections and fevers. And while we were there, it was explained to us, you see the bottom of the dungeons where we were walking, it was a dark color, right, panelists? That was from years and years of packed on human waste. Packed on all of those years. It still remains in those dungeons. The air was heavy with memory, yet filled with resilience. Just think of our ancestors. Not only just what they dealt with, but we're here because a lot of our ancestors survived. The female dungeons. What you see right there is a trapdoor. And that trapdoor led from the female dungeons to the governance palace upstairs of the castle where they resided. And that's where the selected individuals as they wanted to, females, and took them upstairs secretly to rape them and to have their way. Very common in the slave castles. You see that ball at the top right? Looks like a candy ball. You guys see that? For the females who were defiant, they were shackled to the cannonballs, held outside of where the dwelling was in the women's slave dungeons, on display. How dare you be defiant, right? While they were shackled to those cannonballs, they were not offered food or water for that duration. They were used as a display of not to be defiant as well. 150 to 200 women were packed in the small chambers. Women who resisted were beaten or chained. Women who were taken upstairs by governors and soldiers were done for sexual assault. Pregnancy was common. Newborns were taken from mothers. Women endured starvation, sickness, and abuse with no relief. That's the door of no return. As the slaves stayed at the slave castles, weeks up to 3 months, when the ship came in for them then to be loaded onto the ship, they were carried out, shackled, walking in lines. A lot of times as they did their deportation, it was underground, not on top. It's like, what are you ashamed of? You're doing all of this of what you're doing, but their process was, it was an underground pathway that they walked to get to the door of no return. In that picture, there are like two different doors of no return. We went to two different castles. I want to pay attention to the one on the right, the one that has a little bit of light coming through, like in the middle. And then the one to the right of that, that's actually the same shot with the door opened. You may not be able to notice from that picture, but that was a very slim opening. A very slim opening. Some of us, with our sizes, couldn't make it through that opening. The story goes, any slaves that couldn't make it through the opening, we were too big. I'm packing X number onto the ship, I'm sorry. You got to be a particular size, right, to make it through. I looked at that opening and I said, they couldn't make it through there. Yeah, that was the process. That's what happened. So standing in the dungeons, I felt trauma. But guys, I also felt strength, right? Because when you think of what our ancestors went through, and we are descendants of our ancestors, that's strength. That's resilience. That should tell each one of us, whatever it is that you are going through in your life, God is with you. God was with our ancestors, and He is with us as well. So the final slides that I have is actually speaking just to that. The whole story of the slave trade and what happened to our ancestors, don't just dwell on what happened. Dwell on the overall story of how God still kept us. We were meant to be broken. God did not allow that to happen. Look at yourself. Look left and right. Who are you sitting around? Right? Very important. So just a couple of takeaways here. African Americans today are living proof that the slave trade failed to destroy our people. Every Black scholar, pastor, engineer, parent, entrepreneur, teacher, artist, and leader is a testimony to the strength of our ancestors. We carry their DNA, guys, their brilliance, their rhythm, their spiritual insight, and their unstoppable determination. So as they were departed going to various sites, with my last slide, from Ghana, they were taken to Brazil, to the Caribbean, United States, and to Europe. Yes, we have pride in our heritage. We do. When we walk, we carry their walk. When we speak, we carry their wisdom. When we pray, we carry their strength. And when we succeed, guys, we fulfill dreams they never had the chance to voice. We honor them by living with dignity, excellence, and unity. Thank you. Questions? Our ancestors in Africa
Could you
versus
repeat the question? People around can't hear. Use the mic.
The difference between Africans in Africa as well as the Black indigenous people that was here in America. And those is considered our ancestors too. So, I mean, what would you think the resemblance of both of those is?
there are differences as well as similarities. Differences, just look at the path of what each one took. Similarities look at purpose, strength, resilience still needed, right? And still demonstrated in both cases. So I'm not going to be one to speak to differences. I will dwell on the similarities. In both similarities, God has been with us. God takes us through. We drew on our strength from ancestors and what has happened, and we are still doing that today. So that's my answer. Yeah. By the way, he's writing a book on Ghana, and yeah, you two want to connect as well. Very good. We have a lot of experience all over the place. More questions? Yes, ma'am.
Being obedient and speaking into the mic. I went to Ghana. I was in Accra. I was at Cape Coast, and I was in the Volta region. I spent about a month there, 2010. Can you talk? One of the things that struck me about Cape Coast was such horrible, horrific things happened there. Yet the architecture was so beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about that juxtaposition, that the buildings were beautiful, the color on the sand, the whites, the blues. I have those pictures still hanging in my house, but the atrocities on the inside. And I wonder if you had those same kind of reactions when you saw those quarters.
So, very interesting point there as far as how things looked. When you traverse throughout Ghana, Cape Coast, and other cities, we went to about 5 different cities, right, guys? You do see the beauty of colors. When you look at our attire, you see popping colors, right? You see that same thing when you go to the market When you look even at the fishing area, even at boats, guys, I saw those pictures, right? Adam showed a few. You see blues popping and all. When we were in the hotels in Accra and the various cities where we stayed in hotels, artwork was popping all over the place. So what do I take about that? Areas that has such tragic information. One of the things, every place we went where they shared history, they spoke the history not from reading. They spoke the history not from referring to notes, from their heart. That's proudness. That is everything that has taken place that was so tragic, that was so hard, that killed so many of us. That's not where the dwelling remains. It remains on, yes, this is what happened in history, which is part of who we are, which makes up who we are, but you are going to see our excellence. You are going to see what we're capable of. You are going to see our markets where we are out there selling and selling every day. And the homes, as I mentioned and several others mentioned as well, right? We're used to two-story homes and brick and AC and all of that. That's not the typical dwelling of theirs, the locals who are there. But when you are there and when you go through those neighborhoods and you remember too, you see happy people. You see joy. You see people who are training their young ones from youth to be entrepreneurs, little ones. You were talking, say what that little was.
Hello.
How old was he?
He was probably 1.5. Hello.
In the marketplace, he's greeting people. That's what he has observed from his parents, right? So, statues are all over the place as well. And the statues are of liberty. The statues are of freedom. And so it's definitely not a trying to hide all the negative that has happened, but what it is, and the way I took it, it is, with God, look at me now.
Let me add to the architecture of that. During that period of time, 16th century, 14th century, that is how they built castles in Europe. Okay, that was the design they used. Now, to make sure they used stone, they used the most prevalent materials that were there. When we were in Serbia, they said, Croatia, people told us, see the white marble streets. You got to see the white marble streets. Well, we learned that white marble was the most prevalent material there. Let's come out, streets are in white marble. Well, the architecture there that they used in Africa and the design was the same ones they used in Europe. Now, having lived in Germany, we would tour some of those castles in Europe. And in the basements down there, they had dungeons. And in the dungeons, they did some of the same stuff or worse stuff than they did in Africa. That juxtaposition is a Western European juxtaposition. And I think a lot of it that goes on inside is because the environment during the winter is cold. If they wanted to keep up that stuff, they had to put it inside, all right, where they could do something with that. And having to build holding cells for the Africans that they were trading down there, and also defend where they were, because other countries were trying to move in on their territory. So those same places that you were talking about, they had rows of cannon around there that were faced to the sea for defense. So that was the architecture of the time, was like that, and how they did it. And a lot of them are on white because in Southern Africa, there's a lot of white marble that they had to build with for building materials.
Thank you. All right. We now are going to step into the naming ceremony. One more question? Yes. Yes. There was more.
Sorry, did you hear me? I was saying, you all walked in the water, and my question was a powerful one. What did the water feel like? I'm like with you, Karen, with the connection. My word is just God thankful.
Yes.
So.
Yes, so particularly at the last bath, I dipped my hands into the water, And it didn't come out on the recording because I tried to do a selfie as I was saying, and I was saying, God, considering what our ancestors had to deal with going in here, I dipped my hand into the water and brought my hand up, and I said, my arms do not have shackles on them.
Yeah.
You're talking connection? Oh my goodness, yes.
Was the water warm? Was it filtered?
It was warm. It was warm.
At Willow, didn't you go down into that water? Tell us about that, because I know you had a real experience with that.
I did. I had a very emotional reaction to it. I cried, the ugly cry, because I felt the spirit as we went into the water. I was one who took my shoes off and went in. And even as I speak now,
Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it home for y'all, okay, because it's getting late. Abu? Okay, my name is Yafrobi. Y'all meaning Thursday, so my birth date was on Thursday. Fobi meaning reconciliation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the naming ceremony, but I'm going to go back to one place, and that's Kumasi. Kumasi is a place where we visited about the third or fourth day. It's about 3.5 hours from Accra. So we had to ride a bus, get on a bus, and go through several stops to get there. And different restroom experiences, just to let you know, because you know you cannot put the paper in the toilet. You have to put it on the side. So those are some experiences if you travel to Africa. Kumasi is the capital of the Ashanti Kingdom. The Ashanti Kingdom is a part of the Akan tribe. Akan tribe is one of the tribes in Africa. It's a huge tribe. And so we went to the Ashanti Kingdom where Kumasi is located. It is a historical and cultural capital of the Ashanti people. It's the seat of the Ashanti king. As a matter of fact, we were able to see a king being inducted as a chief being inducted into the tribe. We also saw, I just want to throw this out there, but we also saw a funeral processional and funerals. And with funerals, they would wear red. I'm not for sure why, but everyone would have red on and everyone would go to the funeral. What was interesting is that they would advertise somebody who had passed away. And it would be a huge billboard with their age and the date of their death and who they were. It was really, really interesting to see that. Am I correct, folks? Okay. So just back to Kumasi, it is known for kente cloth. It is known for the Adinkra signs. We've seen those symbols that basically mean, purpose, and it gives us some passion, and it's a proverb. We saw the kente cloth workers that were showing us how to make the cloth. What was interesting is that the men were the workers and the women were the advertisers or the marketers. So they were in the market, and the men would stand back and do the work. It is also a place of, Dinka Science Kente Cloth cocoa beans. So we were able to taste, I think we put some cocoa beans, we tasted those, that was really interesting. In Ghana, they also have coconuts. And so they're not the coconuts. My sister was like, that's not the regular coconut I'm looking at. With the hair on it, the brown hair. These didn't have brown hair. They were green. And they would give us coconuts as a drink. And so, we were also able to see that. So we did the naming ceremony. And it was about Sankofa. Sankofa is one of the Adinkran signs. And basically, Sankofa means to go back and to get it. It represents the importance of learning from the past to build the future. So here we are. We participated in this ceremony. The ceremony is a cultural and spiritual event where we, as the ladies and the men, were separated. We were told, or we were given, a kente cloth dress. And that is some of us my sister, Karen, Lisa, some of the men, Jared, Ken, and some others, and we had to dress for the ceremony. These ceremonies often have traditional drumming, so when we walked out, we were dancing, moving, including my husband over there. He's moving. And then we had a blessing from the elder. And then we received our kente cloth stole, as well as in front of me down here is our certificate. The ceremony is deeply spiritual. It's symbolic. It's a way to reconnect with your ancestors and reclaim an identity that may have been lost. We were also able to just come together and take pictures with the chief. He wore his crown. Ken had the crown. He put that on. I don't have his pictures there. Let me see. Yeah, I do. There we are, all together, dancing, sitting, and being named. And that's our new beginning. The reason why we were in Ghana, I just want to share this, because Adam didn't share this. We planned this trip, my husband and I planned this trip about a year ago, in October of 2024. Because in October of 2025 was our 20th wedding anniversary. And we invited several friends and family to come. And we ended up having 13 people come with us. We did more than just what we all talked about. We stayed in the Coconut Grove Hotel or resort, and we had African dancers who danced for us. We had a wedding cake or an anniversary cake. We walked the beach. We met other vendors. And the one thing that they do ask you is, how do you feel? And that time when I was on the beach, I told the gentleman, I'm overwhelmed but not surprised by what happened to our ancestors. So, Adam, this is on you.
Okay, our last slide.
Any questions?
Any questions for her about naming? Names have a significance there. One part of our name is the day we were born. I think the other part is the family name, right? Something like that. At any rate, what we wanted to do, what we wanted to do was because a lot of people aren't going to get to Ghana at all. We wanted to give you a flair or a feeling of the cultural nature of it, not just go see the sites like AAA would give you, but things that meant something to us as African American people and how it moved us. So I'm going to ask my colleagues up here.
Can I say a couple things?
Yeah.
I don't normally speak.
No, I'm coming to you next, but go ahead, you can start.
But anyway, there's a couple things that was really evident to me. And that is how joyful, happy those people are. I mean, around here in the United States, almost anywhere you go, half the people are dollar. Some of them won't even speak to you. That is not the case. No, I don't need any slides. That is not the case there. And the second thing that was most evident to me, and I didn't realize this until I got off the plane in Brussels on the way back, is there's a total lack of racism. That's the first time in my life where I've experienced 12 days where there was no racism whatsoever. Okay? Now that's really different. And the reason why I realized it is when we got off the plane in Brussels to transfer to the next flight, you could feel it. It was palpable from the Belgian people, whatever, whoever happened to be in the airport at the time. So I would recommend going to Africa just for that.
And you could tell from Lisa's experience at the last bath how it touched emotions, how it made you feel, how it made you think, to the point where you're speechless. All you can do is communicate a feeling. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for bringing this and sharing this with us. You took me back 14 years, I think it's been since I've been there, maybe a little bit longer. And I just want to touch two things about when you said the lack of racism. For me, it was that, and it was also the fact that every single person in power looked like me. So I was there to pay God back for saving my life from cancer, right? And the genetic gene that I have has been traced back to Ghana. So I went to Ghana, and I went to the hospital there. The head of the hospital was black. The head of nursing was black. The head of oncology was black. Everybody was black. And I went there to show them, and this might be too much information, but my body, because there's so much stigmatism against reconstructive surgery, and not because of cost. There are some very rich people in the crowd. Very rich. So I was traveling with the Minister of Health's wife, and even she didn't have reconstruction because it was taboo, and there are no pictures of what it would look like. So in their minds, it was that they would be butchered. So I went there to show, no, you won't be butchered. You will actually be even more beautiful than you were before. See? So I'm showing everybody, and it was the most wonderful experience because all of everybody in power looked like us. The second thing, I volunteered in a hospital. The second thing I wanted to share and reiterate is that not just the joy, the kindness. They had nothing compared to what we think we have in the hospital, and they would have this one pot of food, and they would wait until I showed up, and there would be 5 people sharing this little bowl of food that we would eat from Panera Bread, like just ourselves, and they would not eat until I came and ate with them. And that ruined me in the best way. That the kindness and the sharing and the togetherness, I will never ever forget it. So I'm talking too much, but it's because I'm so happy that you shared this with us, and I'm so happy to be able to revisit through your pictures the most wonderful experience in my life. And if you go again, please take your pastor. Amen.
Lisa, what's your number one takeaway outside of the bath of the trip?
The pastor just said it. The joy, the kindness. The number one takeaway was I was very emotional at the last bath. I still get emotional looking at the pictures because the Spirit touched me so well. But the one thing I did take away, as he said, the racism was not there. And people who look like us, I mean, billboards, television shows, everything was all about us. And the biggest takeaway was they don't have the material stuff that we have there, not at all. I mean, but what they had was joy. What they had was joy. And I'm a little bit envious of it.
Ken, you've already added one thing. You want to add anything else, your primary takeaway, sir?
I had an opportunity to talk to a friend of a friend. This friend, I don't know what, he was my classmate, he was in my college, and we did a radio show together, jazz radio show together. And his daughter met a Ghanaian student at some point in time. And we had the opportunity to have dinner with his father, who's actually running a technology company. Basically makes electronic systems for farming and that sort of thing. And he's got his own company. The situation is such that his wife actually lives in London while he's in Accra, taking care of his company. So there's an opportunity for Black people to run businesses. I mean, it's obvious they were into entrepreneurship. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at all the pictures. And this particular young man is an engineering person. Has an engineering degree, I should say. Bottom line is, if you're looking for opportunities to start a business, I think it could be a great place to go. And like I said, there ain't no racism there. Okay? And that makes a big difference. Now, there's always going to be personality difference and blah, 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 but you don't get knocked down the pole just because you're black.
Aaron, what's your principal takeaway from your trip?
Just how proud of people we are. Oh my goodness, we come from a whole line of resilience, determination. You will not break me. I know I will not get broken as well. The other thing is, when you're talking about opportunities, I do want to return as being associate dean at my university. I want to return to do some educational collaborations with Ghana. And so I look forward to that opportunity.
Ditto with everyone else. But there's one thing that I took from this is that in the Ashanti tribe, when you look at the lineage, the mother of the side of the family is the most important, the most significant. So when a king or chief is appointed, it's through the woman. The woman is the decision maker behind the scenes. Kind of like what we do today. You guys know. But that's what I took away from it. That everything else, what everyone else is saying, but we are important as women in Africa. So just keep that in mind when you're out there. You matter. You're important.
Yeah, the one thing, it's just amazing the cruelty that one human can do to another one. I knew about the Middle Passage and slavery, Jim Crow, and all that, but what we went through in the dungeons surprised me, and I'm still processing that to this day.
Final note that we didn't mention, so y'all will feel quite at home there. There is KFC there. And frankly, before we turned into the hotel parking lot, there was a Burger King. Okay? So you got a little something you can feel at home about. No, we did not go to Stevie Wonder's house. Okay? Not his block or wherever he lives there. We did not do that whatsoever. But we had a great tour, but we did go to the nightclub. I know you were. We did go to a nightclub, and the band Afro Soul was alive, well, and kicking. And we've been talking about joy, but in that club, joy went to a whole nother level. And the thing about it is that Jeanette and everybody we saw, they didn't have a dance floor. Okay? The guy singing would take a ramp and they would walk down and sing among the people, but the people were so joyous, they danced in place. They get up, push their chair back, and stand and dance in the aisle there with some energy. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was so much fun.
One more thing, Adam.
Yeah.
On Sunday, Pastor, we had church.
Yeah.
It was just on the bus. So we had a pastor that went with us.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a sermon, and we sang a song, and we prayed, and we had church.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Okay. With that, hey, thank you this afternoon. I know you didn't have a Bronco game to go to, so we appreciate your time and being here, because when we got back, we said, we're too filled up to keep it to ourselves. Okay? And the one thing I learned is that we have to pass it on to other African Americans, which will in turn make ourselves better. That's what you do.
And if you're looking to go to Ghana, we went with Uprise Tours. Uprise Tours. So if you're ever looking to go, they were a tour company, and they did a fabulous job. They're located in Ghana.
In Accra.
They're in Accra. They're in Accra, Ghana.
Well, I never pronounce it right, but you know.
But they have a United
To
States
Les
government.
Berry and the media team back there, thank you for your help to make this work. Yeah, give me the little wave. It works. All right, y'all. Gone off the KFC.